So much winning. So much winning. This was Sarah Huckabee Sanders giving, according to The Storm Has Arrived, Big MAGA account, one of the greatest speeches I've heard in a long time. So let's hear a little bit of what she said at the RNC convention.
Donald Trump was the very first president in my lifetime to take a hard line against China, and I'm proud to be the first and only governor in the country to kick communist China off our farmland and out of my state.
We got a lot of dissidents in Arkansas.
No longer are they going to be rounding up the capitalist class and executing them behind the barn.
We have a lot of Arkansas dissidents. I don't know. She may have missed a few. We got a lot of fans in Arkansas. She missed Tusker. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, no. She told us that story. She hid out in a ditch during that.
During the Huckabee Sanders raids of 2024
against China, and I'm proud to be the first and only governor in the country to kick communist China off our farmland and out of my state.
I don't know what it means, but it sounded.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. Like these people are just so fucking dumb. like, how do you? How I can't. I mean, I'm trying to be polite about it, But yeah, how can you?
Them with those caps with the red stars on them, I was getting sick of it.
Bill Clinton let all them commies in Arkansas.
He let all those commies in. They bought all the farmland. First, we had the queers ruining the soil, and then we got the commies.
All the diners ever serve is potato soup.
Okay.
Five-minute ovation
President
for getting the
Trump
communists out of
leader,
Arkansas.
And he's the leader our country needs. And if ever there was a doubt, earlier this week, we saw just how tough, resilient, courageous, and daring this man is, and we can't get him back in the White House fast enough.
All right. Well, high praise for her old boss there, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, of course, the current governor of Arkansas. Now, Arkansas had 14 storms in 48 hours. So let's take a look at some of that storm damage. Yeah, it looks pretty rough, man. Looks pretty rough. You know what these folks need? They probably need some federal money.
Yeah, it looks like a job for
some
FEMA.
of that their FEMA help. Yeah, look at that, man.
You know what they could use also? They could use some communists to rebuild.
They could use well.
Communists are good in a factory. They're good at manufacturing.
Well, and they're also good about collective action to help the community.
Exactly. They shouldn't have kicked the communists out.
They should have. See, that's karma. That's karma right there. So, hey, wow. This was really must have been a shocker to her. Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders and the state's entire GOP congressional delegation are urging President Trump to reconsider after FEMA denied the state's request for federal disaster relief following a series of deadly storms last month. Wow. I bet she didn't see that coming when she was talking about how fast we needed to get him into the White House. 14 tornadoes struck Arkansas over 2 days, killing 3 people, leaving 32 injured, damaged or destroyed 500 homes, cars, and businesses, leaving behind over 8.8 million of storm damage. A red state begged Trump for help. He said, fuck no. Now they're screwed. How much did Arkansas go for Trump by? I guess that doesn't really matter. 64.2%. I never, based on his history, would have read Donald Trump as a guy who just throws people under the bus, who just uses them, chews them up, and spits them out again. Didn't it all seem like that kind of guy going in? I just can't believe that he's treating his own voters that way. But there you go. You learn something new every day. So 64.2% of Arkansans voted for our current commander in chief. But he doesn't want to give them any FEMA aid after getting 14 storms in 2 days. And a very poor state, too, not the kind of state that can really afford to make up that money. One of their senators here, John Boozman, compounding natural disasters in multiple communities last month will make recovery more difficult for the state and local governments in Arkansas. Our congressional delegation supports Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders' request for reconsideration of a major disaster declaration. Now, you might notice, so the whole delegation signed this, and they're all Republicans, I believe. Now, some of them have been rather outspoken about not giving aid to other localities in similar straits. You might see Tom Cotton's name there. Tom Cotton begs Trump for disaster relief after opposing it for Democratic states. 67 Republicans voted no to assisting people who were left powerless or homeless by Hurricane Sandy. They've got a full list, and guess who's on the list? Tom Cotton. Tom Cotton is one of the Republicans who voted not to give disaster relief to Hurricane Sandy because, it was in a blue state. So those people don't get, but he wants it now. Boy, it's funny how these people want their disaster relief when they need it. Sarah Huckabee Sanders is another one. As long as I am your governor, the meddling hand of big government creeping down from Washington, D.C. will be stopped cold at the Mississippi River. Well, turns out that, you see, the federal government, it's not that there isn't inefficiency or corruption, but the core idea is that it's there to help you with things that are too big for a locality or a state to handle on their own. You see, that's having a society, not just a bunch of people stabbing each other for for a Twinkie or whatever your idea, your libertarian vision of the ideal society is. So now, Trump actually, unlike a lot of people in his party, like Cotton, like Huckabee Sanders, he was a big supporter of disaster relief before he got elected. He talked quite a lot about it when he was on the campaign trail. Particularly talked a lot about how horribly Biden and Harris treated the people in North Carolina. Nobody had ever seen anything like it, according to Trump.
Hurricane has been a bad one. Kamala Harris has left them stranded. This is the worst response to a storm or a catastrophe or a hurricane that we've ever seen, ever. Probably worse than Katrina, and that's hard to beat, right? Worse than Katrina. They didn't do too good a job either, but this is worse. And she sends their money to foreign nations. He and she, they send hundreds of billions of dollars. They send hundreds of billions of dollars to foreign nations. And you know what they're giving our people? $750. 700. Here, Tyson. This is the worst response, I think. Troy, what do you think? The worst? Never saw.
Didn't we just send another $8 billion to Israel? Did we just send another $8 billion to Israel? So they could have taken that money and given it to Arkansas. Could have given it to Arkansas or North Carolina. So Trump, right after he got elected, he went down to North Carolina and he fulfilled his campaign promise not to forget these people, at least if you interpret that campaign promise as meaning letting them step up to a microphone and talk about how badly they've been treated. But he didn't actually plan on doing anything to help them beyond that. Trump just denied North Carolina's request for FEMA relief from Hurricane Helene, calling it unwarranted. And this is another state that went big for Trump. Now, this seems like, as is increasingly typical of this administration's way of governing, even without the legal framework to do things. They're just acting on their policies regardless. So it looks like they're enacting policies that they haven't actually put into law and applying it to these states, regardless of whether these are his own voters or not. Trump officials discuss making it much harder to qualify for federal disaster assistance starting this hurricane season. Trump emergency management officials are discussing reforms that would make it much harder for communities to qualify for federal disaster assistance, honoring President Donald Trump's executive order to shift more responsibility for disaster response and recovery to states rather than the federal government. A memo from acting FEMA Administrator Cameron Hamilton, a Trump appointee, sounds like an evil frat boy from a college movie, obtained by CNN, outlines a long list of recommendations for Trump to follow that could drastically reduce the number of emergency declarations the president approves and the amount of federal assistance doled out to cities and states hit by natural disasters. Such a change ahead of what are typically the worst months for natural disasters across the U.S. could pose significant problems for states that are unprepared to foot the bill and for the millions of Americans impacted by disasters every year. Most notably, the memo sent to an official with the White House Office of Management and Budget proposes dramatically raising the threshold for states to qualify for public assistance, effectively quadrupling the amount of damage a community must suffer in order to receive federal aid. The proposal also recommends reducing the share of recovery costs the federal government will pay, limiting the types of facilities eligible for assistance, and denying all major disaster declarations for snowstorms. Rural communities, especially in large states, could struggle most to fill the gaps. Those areas often suffer severe but concentrated damage and may not qualify for public assistance under a much higher threshold. So, just to flesh that out a little bit, the way they calculate it is how much the damage costs per capita across the state. So, if you've got very heavy damage in 4 towns, like you have in Arkansas, and you have to divide that damage by the number of people in the whole state, there's a very good chance you're not going to qualify for those funds. It's not like a place like LA or New York City where 4 blocks get destroyed. It's going to be an enormous amount of money. Even with the larger population, everything has so much more value. If you destroy these towns, how much are these houses worth? How much are these businesses worth? That's the world that these people live in, but it means a lot to them. But in economic terms, that's probably not going to work out very well, specifically for Trump's voters. That's what's crazy about this. This is why I keep saying I can't imagine a foreign enemy doing a better job destroying the country than this administration is doing. Who wants this? Who wants this? Like it sounds very good, like get the communists off the farmland that don't exist. It sounds very good, you know. Oh yeah, that FEMA, that goddamn FEMA. Well, what are they replacing it with? Like you want to say you want to make FEMA better? They don't want to make FEMA better. They want to get rid of it. They want to just get rid of FEMA. Now it's on the states. So who's that most going to affect? The poorest, most rural states. In other words, Trump's base. He doesn't give a shit even about his most ardent supporters. And that's where we keep saying, talk to me by the end of the year, man. You're going to have just, the Michigan militia is still going to be into Trump. That's going to be about it.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, no, I mean, I guessed he'd be at 40% by the end of the year. He's at 40% now. So I guess I was too conservative in my guess there. But yeah, look, this is just a death cult, basically, at this point. I mean, what do you call it, if not that? It's just a cult of pain. It's a cult of suffering. And, MAGA is just a collective expression of suffering. Chris Hedges described it that way, loosely paraphrasing, but he called it, similar to, a MAGA rally is, a gathering for people to, share in the suffering that they live through. And, he's written about this a lot. I mean, most of his body of work has to do with the degradation of the American way of life. And, he approaches the issue with, I think, an appropriate amount of empathy and understanding for how people became so disenfranchised and so alienated from the system that they turned to this. But now we're here. And at this point, I think it is very quickly going to be the case that only people with that pathological sort of death drive are going to be down for this, because who could be? Who could be? What healthy person looks at a 4-year-old with cancer being deported and thinks, yeah, this is where I want to live? What healthy person looks at a story like this and says, yeah, no, it's great. It's great that they're making it harder for people whose homes were ripped through by a tornado to get the help that they need? Who? Tell me who. Tell me for whom the argument that, well, this is part of that waste, fraud, and abuse that we were rooting at. I mean, now you don't even see the guy making that argument anymore because that was a loser. Like, it's amazing how quickly this all happened. How fast. I mean, the 100 days are usually the honeymoon period. This is what I mean. Like, I had a feeling it would get to this point by the end of the year. But wow. I mean, I've never seen a collapse like this.
Well, this is all just like he's doing fascism wrong.
Right, exactly, yeah.
You're supposed to abuse the scapegoated other, which in the case of this movement were the immigrants.
Right.
And increase their FEMA funding.
Right, exactly.
That's how you do fascism.
Right, you do.
This, you drive off the scapegoated other, and then you fuck your core supporters as hard as you're fucking the other. You know what that's going to do? That's going to make them say, well, maybe the other wasn't so bad. Look what he's doing to me.
Well, exactly. Well, yes. I mean, and that exactly explains why now only a third of people approve of this handling of the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case.
Right.
Because if they thought, yeah, we need to beat up on this guy so that we could get a bigger piece of the pie, there are some people who are cynical enough or just ignorant enough to the point where they'll block that out or they won't pay attention to it because they figure whatever, I'm taking care. Like, there's all kinds of ways people arrive at that bargain. But without the critical piece of actually displaying a modicum of concern for your base, then, yeah, the scapegoat is no longer an effective scapegoat because they realize, wait a minute, you have just as much contempt for me as you do the immigrant. So what's in it for me?
Please clap.